Before there were iPhones or Instagram, there was the savannah. No Wi-Fi, just wildlife. Back then, it took a long time to get from Africa to Australia. It took forever because we weren't flying or even driving. We were walking. That's right. The very first humans walked out of Africa and into the world. Sometime between 2 and 4 million years ago, our earliest ancestors started heading north. They crossed the Red Sea and eventually made their way into Europe. But who exactly are our earliest ancestors? Well, that's where things get complicated because we don't actually know. So scientists have come up with a few names for the species that might have been our ancestors, such as Australopithecus afarensis or Australopithecus africanus. And one of these species might have been the famous Lucy, although scientists aren't 100% sure. But we do know that our ancestors didn't look like us. In fact, they looked more like an ape than a human. They had a brain size of about 400 cubic inches, which is half the size of the average human brain today. Their bodies, though, were built for walking. Onto legs, they had a distinct African ape-like face with a prominent brow ridge, large nostrils, and a small chin. If you saw one walking around today, you'd probably be scared. If you think you've seen one, well, you probably have. Australopithecus lived in Africa until as recently as 2 million years ago, when they went extinct. This means that they could have lived alongside early humans for thousands of years, making them our neighbors in time, not our ancestors. So, who were our real ancestors? Scientists don't really know, but they do have a few ideas. It's possible that our ancestors were actually a mystery species of Australopithecus. Unfortunately, we haven't found any fossils, so all we know is that they walked upright and lived in trees. Other scientists think that our ancestors were actually a mystery species of Kingianthropus platypus. Once again, no fossils have been found yet, but scientists think they may have been a transitional form between chimps and humans. We don't know who our ancestors really were, but we do know that they were smart enough to use tools. About 2.6 million years ago, stone tools appeared across Africa, marking the beginning of the Stone Age. These tools are called Old Dowan tools, and they include choppers, scrapers, and hammerstones. But who made them? For a long time, scientists thought that they were made by Australopithecus afarensis, the same species that might have included Lucy. However, we now know that Australopithecus afarensis was too primitive to make tools. Instead, they probably used them. So, who was responsible for the first tools? Well, scientists think it might have been our ancestors, a mysterious group of proto-humans known as the handyman. You heard that right. Scientists think that humans may have actually been named after a tool. See, this is a stone tool from about 2.4 million years ago. It was found in Ethiopia, along with many others. Scientists realized that this tool was much more advanced than the old Dowan tools that came before it. They decided to name the new toolmaker Homo habilis, meaning handyman. But wait a minute. If Homo habilis was a different species than ours, how can we be related to them? Well, that's where things get tricky. See, naming species isn't always easy. Sometimes scientists will name a new species based on a single characteristic, like the fact that they made tools. However, this doesn't always work, because it turns out that other animals like chimpanzees can also use tools. And if you want to name a species after their intelligence, well, then what are you gonna do? Name them after a squirrel. In this case, Homo habilis turned out to be a bit too similar to Australopithecus afarensis to be a separate species. So scientists combined the two into one, deciding that Homo habilis was actually just an early version of Australopithecus afarensis. Today, Homo habilis is considered a part of our lineage, but it's not considered its own species. Instead, it's considered a subspecies of Australopithecus afarensis. Homo erectus means straight man. And when he showed up, things got serious. He was the first hominin to stand at over 6 feet tall. He had a massive brain and he knew how to control fire. Plus, he was the first hominin to leave Africa. Homo erectus traveled all over the Old World, from Europe to Asia and everywhere in between. He settled down and raised cattle, pigs and goats, and he buried his dead. Plus, he made weapons like spears and knives, which meant that he was capable of hunting big game. Now, the interesting thing about Homo erectus is that he stuck around for a long time. He lived in Africa for 1.8 million years, in Europe for 300,000 years, and in Asia for 1.3 million years. But eventually, Homo erectus went extinct. Some scientists think that climate change played a role, while others think that it was competition with other humans. As the ice sheets spread across the northern continents, the climate became drier and colder, which meant that fewer plants and animals could survive. In some areas, Homo erectus simply couldn't find enough food. But other scientists think that Homo erectus went extinct because of us, Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens, or wise men, appeared in Africa about 300,000 years ago. At first, they lived alongside other humans like Homo neanderthalensis, or simply Neanderthal. Neanderthals were shorter and stronger than Homo sapiens. They had bigger brains and sharper features. They hunted with spears and lived in caves. In fact, we know a lot about Neanderthals because we found tons of fossils. We even found DNA inside those fossils, which allowed scientists to sequence their genome. What did they find? Well, it turns out that Neanderthals and Homo sapiens were able to reproduce, which means that most people of European and Asian descent carry a little bit of Neanderthal DNA inside of them. Did Neanderthals go extinct because of Homo sapiens? Well, maybe. There's evidence that Homo sapiens hunted Neanderthals for food, but there's also evidence that they traded with them. Perhaps they interbred, but then something happened, and eventually the Neanderthals disappeared. Where did the Homo sapiens go? Well, they spread out across the globe. They developed agriculture and cities. They invented writing, math, and science. They created art, music, and poetry. They changed the world. Did they change the world for the better? Well, that depends on who you ask. Today, Homo sapiens are the only surviving human species. But what does that mean? Are we the smartest? The strongest? The most evolved? Well, yes, but that's not what I want to talk about. Here's what I want to talk about. Look at this fossil. This fossil comes from a 7-year-old boy who lived in Israel 120,000 years ago. His name was Nadi. When Nadi was 2 years old, a rock fell on his foot and broke it. As he healed, his foot became infected and he developed arthritis. At age 7, he couldn't walk without crying. So his family brought him to a cave to live out the rest of his days. This cave was later discovered by archaeologists who found Nadi's bones inside. Here's the thing. Humans are the only species on Earth that would take care of a sick child. Sure, male lions will sometimes help injured lionesses, but they usually kill cubs that can't hunt. Humans are the only species on Earth that would abandon everything else to take care of the sick. And that's why we survived. Not because we were the smartest or the strongest or the most evolved, but because we were willing to set aside our differences to help each other. That's what made us us. And if you want to learn more about us, well, then you should check out this playlist right here. All these videos explore the amazing story of humanity. And don't forget to subscribe. After all, our story isn't over yet. It's just begun. Hey, thanks for watching. Want more fun science facts delivered straight to your inbox? Subscribe to our newsletter.